Winning the Frame Battle, AI and Emotional Self-Defense. Introduction. Imagine this. It's a Tuesday morning and you're merely attempting to decipher the school pickup schedule. Then your phone vibrates. It's an email from someone with whom you share a fraught dynamic, perhaps a co-parent, and its contents eschew mere logistics. Instead, it's a torrent of accusations, barbed criticisms, and perhaps even a personal barb or two. Your stomach clenches. Your heart begins to pound. Suddenly, the uncomplicated task of coordinating a child's day morphs into navigating a minefield. You feel that familiar surge of indignation, that desperate impulse to defend yourself, to retaliate with your own sharp retorts. This is no mere inconvenient email. It's a calculated maneuver, designed to ensnare you in an emotional tempest, to strip you of your composure. You are not isolated. Many of us confront these clandestine battlegrounds daily, within our homes, across the digital ether, and in our most vulnerable relationships. The toll of succumbing is steep. It saps our vitality, erodes our self-assurance, and can even fracture the very connections we strive to preserve. At the core of these enervating exchanges lies what we might term emotional bait. Consider it the alluring, yet venomous, lure cast to ensnare you. It is the insult cloaked as an inquiry, the unjust accusation crafted to provoke defensiveness, the passive-aggressive barb that festers. Individuals deploy this bait for myriad reasons, sometimes to assert dominance, sometimes to abdicate accountability, and often, simply to inflict upon you the distress they themselves are experiencing. When you ingest this bait, you are not merely reacting, you are trespassing onto their terrain, conforming to their rules. And it is precisely here that the true struggle commences. This is the essence of what we shall designate a frame battle. A frame, in the realm of communication, functions akin to the gilded border around a painting. It dictates the context, the mood, and the perceived reality of the unfolding situation. In a frame battle, one party endeavors to impose their frame upon the circumstances, to compel you to perceive events through their lens, to elicit a specific emotional response. They seek to draw you into their world, their narrative, their emotional state. Should you be drawn in, you forfeit your own perspective, your own emotional equilibrium, and dominion over the discourse. To prevail in the frame battle is to resist being ensnared. It is to remain steadfast, to retain your own framework of reality, and to steadfastly refuse another's dictation of your feelings or your reactions. This phenomenon is particularly prevalent and acute in scenarios such as high-conflict co-parenting. Envision that parent dispatching that wounding email. Their objective may not be to resolve the school pickup dilemma at all. Instead, they might aim to engender guilt, anger, or a sense of inadequacy within you. They are endeavoring to establish a frame wherein they are the aggrieved party and you are the perpetrator. This is the frame battle in motion, and if you take the bait, you have already conceded defeat. For years, we have been schooled in the art of navigating difficult conversations. We have encountered counsel advocating for equanimity, assertiveness, or, at times, strategic withdrawal. These are commendable precepts in theory, yet when an individual actively deploys emotional bait, striving to drag you into their frame battle, these strategies often prove untenable. Attempting to calmly articulate your position to someone predisposed to misinterpretation can feel akin to shouting into a hurricane. Evading the conflict may offer transient solace, but it frequently leaves a residue of resentment and the underlying issues unresolved. These conventional methodologies falter because they typically presuppose an equitable playing field, a mutual inclination towards constructive engagement, which is conspicuously absent when one party is intent on emotional provocation. But what if an alternative existed? What if you possessed a tool capable of facilitating your disengagement from the immediate emotional maelstrom, enabling you to dissect the bait and formulate a response that safeguards your tranquility without exacerbating the conflict? This is where the transformative power of artificial intelligence, particularly tools such as ChatGPT, enters the fray. Conceive of AI not as a substitute for human connection, but as an astute, strategic ally for your emotional self-defense. When you perceive the tendrils of emotional bait being cast, the simple yet revolutionary counsel is to ChatGPT it up. This entails employing the AI as a buffer. Rather than unleashing an immediate, emotionally charged rejoinder, you can turn to AI. It bestows upon you the invaluable temporal and cognitive space required to detach from the immediate sting of the words. You can then leverage AI to assist in processing the situation, to comprehend the bait, and to help you construct a response that is lucid, objective, and resolute without succumbing to the emotional frame of the other party. This is not an endorsement of passivity or acquiescence to mistreatment. It is about reclaiming dominion over your own emotional state and steering the conversation toward a trajectory that serves your well-being. It empowers you to triumph in the frame battle by refusing to engage on the aggressor's terms. Within the pages of this book, we shall embark on an exploration of this potent new methodology. You will learn to discern emotional bait from a considerable distance and, more crucially, how to steadfastly refuse to ingest it. We will delve deeply into the intricate dynamics of the frame battle, elucidating its mechanisms and the art of consistently prevailing. Most exhilaratingly, we will unveil practical, step-by-step strategies for harnessing AI tools such as ChatGPT to safeguard your emotional reserves, maintain your composure, and communicate with enhanced efficacy, even amidst the most formidable circumstances. You will discover how to reassert your sense of control, preserve your peace, and transmute those draining, conflict-laden interactions into opportunities for clear, composed, and empowered communication. Let us commence this journey toward mastering your frame battle. Chapter 1. Understanding Emotional Manipulation. 1. Recognizing emotional triggers. Conversations can sometimes feel like navigating a minefield. A careless word, and suddenly an explosion erupts, or a stony silence descends, or you are left feeling utterly wretched. It's as if an unseen hand has found a secret switch, and your involuntary reaction is immediate. This is rarely accidental. More often, it signals that you have inadvertently stepped into what is termed a frame battle, where another person endeavors to ensnare you within their perspective, their emotional landscape. The mastery of these encounters lies not in brute force or volume. It is found in dissecting the why behind your own reactions. It is in discerning the invisible threads that can be tugged, the emotional fault lines that render us susceptible. Consider these fault lines as exquisitely sensitive points. When brushed, they elicit an instant, unbidden response. Those who manipulate are often adept at locating these tender spots and pressing them to elicit the desired reaction. Their aim is to warp the conversational reality, to imbue you with a specific feeling: guilt, rage, dread, or inadequacy, thereby securing their dominion over the situation. To win the frame battle is to understand these sensitivities so profoundly that you can arrest yourself before being swept into their emotional vortex. These sensitivities are not inherent weaknesses, not truly. They are intrinsic to the human condition, deeply etched responses forged throughout our lives, frequently by the crucible of past experiences. When a manipulator strikes one of these nerves, it is akin to bypassing the rational mind and seizing directly upon primal instinct. A surge of anger, a pang of shame, or a desperate compulsion to appease may well up before conscious thought and intervene. This is precisely their calculation. They covet an emotional response, not a rational one, for an emotional reaction is far more predictable and amenable to control. By recognizing these triggers, you begin to erect a bulwark, a means of intercepting yourself before you are engulfed by another's emotional tempest. Let us examine some prevalent triggers. Foremost among them is the gnawing fear of rejection or abandonment. Should an individual harbor a profound dread of solitude or disapproval, they may go to extraordinary lengths to circumvent discord, or to perpetually acquiesce, even at the expense of their own needs. A manipulator can exploit this fear by subtly implying disapproval or hinting at the withdrawal of attention or support. Abruptly, you find yourself striving with escalating intensity to be liked, to maintain placidity, even when it feels fundamentally wrong. You are being drawn into their frame, where your intrinsic worth is tethered to their approbation. Another pervasive trigger is the deep-seated craving for approval and validation. While we all yearn to be recognized and valued, for some, this need is acutely pronounced. Manipulators can capitalize on this by employing adulation to secure your allegiance, or by instilling a sense of culpability should you fail to meet their expectations. Envision someone lavishing you with praise, elevating you to an esteemed pedestal, only to then solicit a significant favor or to critique some aspect of your conduct. The dissonance can be startling, yet the ingrained desire for that positive affirmation renders you more inclined to comply or to feel diminished for not attaining their perceived standard. They leverage your yearning for validation to draw you into their paradigm, where your existence revolves around soliciting their favorable regard. A robust sense of justice and equity also constitutes a potent trigger. The majority of individuals find the perception of unfairness abhorrent. Manipulators can transmute this into a weapon by presenting a scenario in a manner that suggests an injustice has transpired, even if it is a fabrication or a partial truth. They may magnify a minor infraction or contort facts to evoke a powerful urge within you to rectify the situation, to defend yourself, or to champion their purported cause. This emotional impetus can blind you to their own manipulative stratagems. They have framed the situation as an inequitable contest, and your innate inclination is to intervene and restore balance, all while they orchestrate the narrative. Guilt and shame are perhaps the most insidious triggers. They serve as formidable instruments of control, for they tap directly into our moral compass and our self-regard. A manipulator might wield guilt by making you feel accountable for their unhappiness or predicaments, irrespective of your actual involvement. Alternatively, they may induce shame regarding a past transgression or a perceived failing, leaving you feeling inherently deficient. This can precipitate a desperate impulse to apologize, to atone, or to prove your worthiness. They are drawing you into a frame where you are the culpable party, the one requiring amendment, while they remain the victim or the arbiter. And then there is anger and frustration. While often regarded as negative emotions, they can also serve as potent catalysts. Manipulators frequently aim to incite these feelings, for anger can cloud judgment and precipitate rash actions. They may resort to insults, dismiss your sentiments, or deliberately provoke you with outlandish pronouncements. When consumed by anger, clarity of thought becomes elusive. You might lash out, utter regrettable words, or become so fixated on your ire that the broader context recedes from view. The manipulator has successfully ensnared you within their frame of conflict and disarray, from which they can then exploit your emotional state. Finally, the aspiration for peace and harmony can act as a trigger, compelling us to shun necessary confrontation. We may so earnestly desire to preserve tranquility that we assent to terms we find objectionable, or we permit disrespectful conduct to pass unchallenged. A manipulator recognizes this and may employ passive-aggressive stratagems or cultivate an atmosphere of tension that fosters an eagerness to smooth over difficulties. You might capitulate to their demands simply to extricate yourself from the discomfort, effectively conceding the frame battle by compelling you into a position of reluctant accord. How, precisely, does a manipulator uncover these triggers? It is typically a process of meticulous observation and tentative exploration, akin to a detective seeking clues. They scrutinize your reactions. They may initiate with minor provocations, much like a child prodding a slumbering canine to gauge its response. They might utter a subtly critical remark, pose a loaded question, or broach a sensitive subject, and then meticulously observe. Do you flinch? Do you become defensive? Do you attempt to placate? Do you betray visible distress? For instance, Imagine someone endeavoring to ascertain your sensitivity to criticism regarding your professional acumen. They might casually allude to something they heard about a project you undertook, but phrase it in a manner that subtly implies a deficiency in your performance. They are not directly assailing you, but rather testing the waters. If you immediately adopt a defensive posture, launch into an elaborate justification of your actions, or appear visibly wounded, they have identified a trigger. They have learned that questioning your competence is a sensitive area for you. Or consider the trigger associated with fairness. A manipulator might recount a biased rendition of another's predicament, portraying it as profoundly unjust. They are not soliciting your direct opinion, but rather assessing your reaction. If you instantly erupt with indignation and a fervent desire to rectify the situation, they have pinpointed your trigger concerning injustice. They now possess the knowledge to leverage this to involve you in their machinations or to divert attention from their own conduct. These tests can be remarkably subtle. They may manifest in a particular vocal inflection, condescending, excessively saccharine, or aggressively interrogative. They might be conveyed through body language, an eye roll, a sigh, or a dismissive gesture. They might be embedded in the choice of vocabulary, employing loaded terminology, or resorting to sweeping generalizations. The crucial element is that they are seeking an emotional response, not a rational one. They wish to witness that flicker of anger, that constriction in your chest, that urgent compulsion to explain or defend. Once a trigger is identified, they possess a lever they can manipulate to influence your behavior and thought processes. This knowledge then empowers them to deliberately push your buttons whenever they seek to control the narrative or elicit a desired action. This is the very essence of establishing a frame battle. They are discovering the vulnerabilities in your emotional defenses and preparing to exploit them. The repercussions of consistently succumbing to manipulative tactics extend far beyond transient discomfort. When you habitually react emotionally rather than responding thoughtfully, your capacity for sound decision-making can become compromised. You may assent to propositions you later regret, make impulsive choices propelled by fear or anger, or evade crucial dialogues, for fear of provoking yourself or being provoked by another. Over time, this can corrode your self-esteem. If you are perpetually in a state of defensiveness, guilt, or inadequacy due to another's expertly targeted pressures, you begin to internalize these feelings. You may come to believe that you are incompetent or unfair or unlovable. Your sense of self-worth suffers a significant blow. In interpersonal relationships, this can foster a cycle of appeasement and resentment. You might find yourself perpetually yielding to avoid conflict, only to harbor lingering resentment and feel exploited. Such a dynamic is profoundly detrimental to both individuals and the relationship itself. Genuine connection is absent. There is merely the management of each other's emotional triggers. Furthermore, your ability to establish and uphold healthy boundaries is severely undermined. If someone comprehends how to trigger your fear of rejection, they can exploit that to engender guilt when you decline. If they can activate your sense of fairness, they can manipulate you into undertaking more than you ought. Your boundaries become permeable, allowing others to encroach upon your personal space and emotional well-being. This perpetual state of emotional reactivity also leads to chronic stress and can exact a considerable toll on both your mental and physical health. So, how does one commence the process of identifying their personal emotional triggers? It is a voyage of self-discovery, necessitating candid introspection. The initial stride involves attuning yourself to your own responses. When do you experience that surge of emotion, anger, frustration, anxiety, defensiveness, guilt? What transpired immediately preceding that feeling? What was uttered? What was the intonation? What was the context? Consider keeping a journal if that proves beneficial. Document instances where you felt overwhelmed, distressed, or disproportionately reactive. Refrain from self-judgment, simply observe. What were the recurrent themes? Did a particular individual or type of remark consistently elicit a strong reaction? Were there specific circumstances that invariably led to an emotional outburst? For example, you might observe that every time your parenting choices are questioned, you become intensely defensive. That defensiveness is a crucial indicator. It suggests that your competence as a parent is a potential trigger. Another avenue for identifying triggers lies in contemplating your core fears and insecurities. What do you most dread? Which facets of yourself evoke the greatest insecurity? Frequently, our triggers are directly tethered to these deeply ingrained vulnerabilities. If you harbor a profound fear of being perceived as incompetent, any intimation, however subtle, that you might be, can precipitate a potent emotional response. If you fear being unloved, anything that resembles rejection can become a powerful trigger. It is also advantageous to distinguish between genuine values and emotional triggers. Your values are the principles you consciously hold in high regard: honesty, kindness, integrity, diligence. These are ideals you aspire to. Emotional triggers, conversely, are often more automatic, less rational responses. While you may value fairness, a trigger associated with injustice might compel you to react with uncharacteristic anger or impulsivity, even if the situation does not warrant such an extreme reaction. Recognizing this distinction helps you understand that while your values serve as guiding principles, your triggers are emotional mechanisms that can be activated, sometimes against your better judgment. The ultimate objective here is to transition from being a reactive individual to a responsive one. A reactive person resembles a marionette, their strings manipulated by external stimuli. A responsive individual, however, has attained sufficient self-awareness to pause, observe, and deliberately choose their response. They acknowledge the emotion but do not permit it to dictate their actions. They recognize that a trigger has been activated, but they do not automatically fall prey to the manipulator's snare. They can discern the poke and elect not to engage with the bait. Once we comprehend what provokes our emotional reactions, the subsequent critical phase is to recognize how these reactions are being deliberately instigated. Manipulators do not merely stumble upon your triggers, they actively seek them out and employ them to orchestrate the frame battle. They are adept at constructing scenarios designed to press your buttons, to draw you into their emotional reality, and to steer the discourse in a direction that benefits them. This leads us to an examination of the specific techniques. 2. Identifying toxic communication patterns. Navigating the labyrinth of fractured communication can leave one adrift, particularly when attempting to steer through the treacherous waters of co-parenting. You may find yourself ensnared in a dynamic where the other party seems resolutely bent on fostering discord. Their pronouncements may land with the sting of injustice, or simply feel profoundly misaligned with reality. This is not the caprice of misfortune. It is frequently a calculated strategy of discourse, meticulously designed to destabilize your equilibrium. It is precisely here that an acute understanding of the underlying machinations becomes your foremost bulwark. Envision it thus. When an individual endeavors to provoke anger, guilt, or bewilderment through their chosen words, they are, in essence, attempting to ensnare you within the confines of their worldview, the particular vantage point. This represents the very crux of what we term a frame battle. Their objective is to elicit a specific response from you, to provoke agitation, to compel a defensive posture, or to secure your assent to their distorted perception of events. Victory in this arena is not contingent upon prevailing in an argument. Rather, it hinges on maintaining an unruffled composure and a lucid mind, thereby enabling you to manage the situation without succumbing to emotional injury. The inaugural step toward triumph lies in cultivating the discernment to recognize these stratagems for what they truly are. One of the most prevalent mechanisms through which toxic communication operates is a form of bait and switch. It resembles an offer of something valuable, artfully concealed beneath a veneer of unpleasantness. Imagine the necessity of discussing a matter of import concerning your child, perhaps a medical appointment or an academic event. You might dispatch an email or initiate a call, anticipating a direct and uncomplicated resolution. Instead of receiving merely the requisite information, you are assailed by a torrent of recriminations, insults, or accusations. The crucial detail, the child's engagement, becomes submerged beneath an avalanche of negativity. The other party's true interest lies not in resolving the issue, but in inflicting emotional distress upon you. They seek to ensnare you, to provoke you into biting at the bait of their animosity or censure, thereby diverting your focus from the salient concern to a defensive posture. This maneuver inexorably draws you into their frame, where the discourse shifts from the child's welfare to an indictment of your perceived shortcomings. This artistry of emotional provocation constitutes a fundamental skill set for those who engage in toxic communication. They appear to possess an uncanny ability to locate your vulnerabilities, your buttons, and to press them with unnerving precision. This is not haphazard, it is meticulously orchestrated. They may employ loaded language, words imbued with significant emotional resonance, designed to evoke a particular feeling. Sarcasm, a favored instrument, renders a barbed remark palatable by cloaking it in the guise of jest. Condescension, the act of addressing you as if you possess inferior intellect or capability, is another frequently utilized tactic. And then there are the overt personal affronts. Each of these is crafted with a singular purpose: to instigate a potent emotional reaction within you. Should they succeed in igniting your anger, they have achieved their aim. If they can engender feelings of guilt, they have triumphed. Should they manage to foster insecurity, their objective is met. Your emotional response is their desired outcome, for when you are governed by emotion, rational thought recedes. You relinquish control. You are ensnared within their frame. A particularly insidious stratagem is gaslighting, a sophisticated form of reality distortion. This involves an attempt to undermine your own perceptions, your recollection of events, or even your very sense of sanity. They may fabricate outright falsehoods regarding past occurrences, or contort facts to such an extent that you begin to question the veracity of your own knowledge. For instance, if you recall a specific arrangement with your former partner regarding a schedule and you bring it to their attention, they might vehemently deny its existence. They may assert, "That is not at all what we agreed upon," or "Your memory is faulty." They might diminish the significance of past events, remarking, "It was not of such consequence," even if those events inflicted profound distress. Their ultimate aim is to cultivate confusion and self-doubt, thereby fostering a dependence on their fabricated narrative. This constitutes a direct assault on your perception of reality, eroding your confidence in your own judgment, which is indispensable for maintaining your emotional fortitude. Another archetypal figure in the drama of toxic communication is the victim. Manipulative communicators frequently cast themselves in the perpetual role of the wronged party. They are invariably the ones who have been wronged, who are perpetually misunderstood, who bear the greatest burden of suffering. They may subtly or overtly attribute their misfortunes to others. This can manifest as a litany of complaints regarding the arduousness of their existence, directly attributable to the actions of others or through veiled suggestions of unfair treatment. The underlying intention is to garner sympathy and to engender a sense of obligation or guilt in the recipient of their communication. You may find yourself moved by pity or feeling responsible for their unhappiness, which can increase your susceptibility to acceding to their demands or overlooking their transgressions. They artfully position themselves as helpless and deserving of preferential treatment, endeavoring to draw you into their orbit of commiseration or obligation. What transpires when these tactics fail to yield the desired result? When you resist the bait, when you do not succumb to anger, when guilt does not take root, the response is frequently an intensification of the behavior. Toxic communicators find it profoundly discomforting when their strategies prove ineffectual. They require a reaction. Consequently, they may amplify the intensity of their actions. This could manifest as increased aggression, veiled threats, or even attempts to embroil third parties in the conflict. They may seek to enlist friends, family members, or even legal representatives to exert greater pressure upon you. The critical element here is their desperation for an emotional engagement. They crave your reaction, your entanglement in the ensuing drama. If you can successfully resist this impulse to react, if you can maintain your position outside the escalating frame, you can often de-escalate the situation. Now, let us pause and pose two pivotal questions that can illuminate these patterns with greater clarity. The first is, what specific words, phrases, or tones within the communication immediately provoke a negative emotional response in me? And what is the underlying reason for this reaction? Take a moment to truly contemplate this. When you encounter an email or perceive a particular inflection in a voice, what is it that causes your stomach to tighten or your heart to race? Is it a specific qualifier such as always or never? Is it a condescending intonation? Is it a direct accusation? Comprehending these triggers is akin to discovering the keys to your own emotional vault. It empowers you to identify the precise methods by which individuals endeavor to push your buttons. Knowledge of these personal susceptibilities enables you to anticipate them and to consciously choose not to permit them to dictate your conduct. For instance, if you are aware that being labeled irresponsible propels you into a defensive spiral, you can recognize when that word is employed and consciously endeavor to detach from the emotional fallout it typically engenders. The second crucial inquiry is the primary objective of this communication to impart information or to elicit an emotional response and exert control? How can I discern the underlying intent? This lies at the very heart of understanding the frame battle. Look beyond the superficial veneer of the words. Does the message focus on resolving a practical concern, such as arranging the transfer of children? Or does it appear more preoccupied with making you feel inadequate, diminishing your standing, or compelling your agreement with a particular viewpoint, irrespective of the factual basis? Frequently, the very architecture of the communication offers clues. If there is an extensive preamble, a profusion of complaints, or a significant amount of personal commentary preceding the core message, it is likely more concerned with eliciting an emotional response than conveying information. If the language employed is aggressive, accusatory, or excessively dramatic, that serves as another indicator. The intent is often to draw you into their emotional vortex, to compel you to champion their cause rather than to engage in a calm, rational discourse. Recognizing these patterns of toxic communication represents a monumental stride. It is akin to finally grasping the rules of a game you have been consistently losing. You have identified the tactics being deployed against you. However, the mere awareness of these patterns is insufficient to win the frame battle in isolation. You have observed their design to hijack your emotions and disarm you, rendering you vulnerable. The subsequent, indispensable phase of this journey involves comprehending why these tactics are so potent and, more critically, how we can fortify our defenses against them. We must transition from merely identifying the problem to actively implementing strategies that safeguard our emotional well-being and empower us to navigate these arduous interactions with resilience and equanimity. 3. The impact of disrespect in conversations. Disrespect in discourse transcends mere impoliteness. It is frequently a calculated maneuver, a deliberate attempt to diminish, disorient, or distress. Envision it as a succession of minute projectiles, each individually negligible, yet collectively capable of inflicting significant wear. This relentless attrition erodes one's composure, fostering a persistent disquiet. Such is the insidious damage wrought by disrespect, a tactic designed to undermine self-assurance and sow seeds of doubt. It is engineered to prod at vulnerabilities, to elicit an emotional response, and in that response, in the ensuing agitation or defensiveness, the perpetrator often perceives a petty triumph. They have succeeded in drawing you into their skewed perspective, their negative orbit, which is precisely their objective. Consider Sarah, a friend I've been assisting. She was navigating a fraught period with her ex-husband, Mark, concerning their children. Mark habitually dispatched emails laden with sarcasm and veiled barbs. He never overtly declared, "You are an inadequate mother," but rather couched his criticisms in phrases such as, "I am confident you will devise a singular approach to the school project given your distinctive organizational style," or a gentle reminder regarding the permission slip, "I presume you have managed to unearth it by now." Individually, these remarks might appear as trifling annoyances. Yet, for Sarah, they were akin to a relentless volley of tiny darts, each striking its mark. Every communique chipped away at her certainty, prompting her to question her own organizational acumen, her very capacity as a mother. She would spend hours poring over these messages, her stomach churning, attempting to decipher latent meanings and construct internal defenses. This perpetual internal struggle left her profoundly depleted and perpetually anxious. This is precisely where the concept of a frame battle emerges. Imagine a picture frame. The individual exhibiting disrespect endeavors to compel you to inhabit their frame, to view the world through their lens. Their frame may depict you as incompetent, unreasonable, or excessively emotional. Disrespect serves as their implement, their means of forcing you into this constricted perspective. When Sarah received an email from Mark and began to feel anxious and defensive, she was being drawn into his frame. He sought to mold her perception of herself into his desired image, that of someone struggling with fundamental tasks. His disrespect was the lure, and her emotional reaction was his successful enticement. This unceasing barrage of disrespect does more than merely induce discomfort. It actively dismantles our emotional boundaries. These boundaries function as invisible bulwarks, safeguarding our inner selves, dictating acceptable interpersonal conduct. When confronted with persistent disrespect, it is akin to a battering ram relentlessly pounding against these defenses. Initially, they may withstand the assault. However, with repeated impacts, they begin to fracture, to weaken. Once these boundaries are compromised, the ability to assert a firm no or to effectively resist diminishes significantly. One feels exposed, adrift in a tempest without shelter. For Sarah, Mark's emails constituted a perpetual storm. She had once been meticulously organized, but his incessant jibes eroded her self-belief. She began to second-guess every decision pertaining to their children. Had she submitted the form late? Had she overlooked something crucial? The disrespect engendered such profound insecurity that her normally robust boundaries began to disintegrate. She found herself responding to his emails with lengthy, overly detailed explanations, striving to disprove his implied disorganization. Yet, this merely perpetuated the cycle. She was reacting emotionally, inadvertently validating his perspective in his eyes, and becoming further ensnared in his frame. Her communication had devolved from a stance of calm confidence to one of panicked defense. This leads us to a critical juncture, the cycle of provocation and reaction. Disrespectful communication is frequently a calculated attempt to elicit a response. The manipulator is not typically interested in genuine dialogue. Their aim is to witness your discomfiture, your anger, or your distress. They desire to see you lose your composure. Because when composure is lost, one often says or does things uncharacteristic of their usual demeanor. Defensiveness may arise, sharp retorts may be uttered, or one may become so consumed by emotion that the original point is lost. This is their method of gaining control. They initiate with disrespect, you react emotionally, and in their estimation, they have prevailed. They have skillfully manipulated the situation to their advantage by compelling you to operate on their emotional frequency. Consider this: if Mark had dispatched a calm, measured email inquiring about the school project, and Sarah had responded with equal equanimity, there would have been no frame battle. But Mark did not seek a tranquil exchange. He desired Sarah's discomposure. When she did become flustered and sent him a lengthy, defensive email, he achieved his objective. He could then point to her overreaction as evidence of her instability. The disrespect was the spark, her emotional response the fuel, and the frame battle the conflagration in which they both found themselves ensnared. The truly insidious aspect of this dynamic lies in its psychological toll. Enduring constant disrespect is profoundly exhausting. It is akin to engaging in a low-intensity conflict with every interaction. Over time, this attrition takes its toll. Anxiety levels may escalate. There may be a perpetual apprehension regarding the other person's next utterance or action. This breeds self-doubt. One begins to question one's own intellect, judgment, and intrinsic worth. Thoughts such as, perhaps they are correct, perhaps I am incompetent, perhaps I am overreacting, may emerge. This self-doubt becomes a burdensome weight. And if this pattern persists, it can culminate in emotional burnout. Burnout is the sensation of utter depletion, of having nothing left to offer. One becomes desensitized, cynical, and finds it difficult to muster any enthusiasm. Vitality wanes, motivation evaporates, and even rudimentary tasks can feel insurmountable. This represents the ultimate objective of those who wield disrespect as a weapon, to drain you, to render you so weary and uncertain of yourself that you are incapable of effectively defending your position or managing the situation. Let us revisit Sarah's narrative for a moment. Prior to her exploration of new strategies, she existed in a state of perpetual vigilance. Every notification on her phone, particularly if it originated from Mark, would send a tremor of dread through her. A knot would form in her stomach, her palms would grow clammy, and her mind would race, attempting to preempt the inevitable assault. She began to question her parenting efficacy, fearing that her mistakes might have long-term detrimental effects on her children. She experienced a profound weariness, a sense of being locked in an unwinnable battle. This extended beyond mere email correspondence. It encompassed her very mental and emotional well-being. The disrespect was slowly extinguishing her inner light. So how does disrespect actively destabilize us? It is a multifaceted assault. Firstly, it directly targets our sense of competence. When our ideas are dismissed, our efforts belittled, or our capabilities implicitly questioned, a seed of doubt is sown. We begin to ponder, did I truly err? Am I not sufficiently intelligent? This self-doubt engenders hesitancy. We become less inclined to articulate our opinions or to initiate action, fearing further criticism. Secondly, disrespect preys upon our emotional state. Condescending tones, dismissive gestures, or eye rolls are designed to make us feel foolish or insignificant. This can trigger feelings of anger, hurt, or embarrassment. When overwhelmed by these emotions, our capacity for clear, rational thought is severely compromised. We cease to be strategic and become reactive. We relinquish control of our own minds to our emotions. Consider Mark's emails once more. When he wrote, "I presume you have managed to unearth it by now," the implication extended beyond the permission slip. It was a barb directed at Sarah's perceived disorganization. It prompted her to question her ability to even locate a piece of paper. This doubt made her less likely to confidently state, "Yes, I have it right here," and more prone to begin a frantic search, just in case. The disrespect, in this instance, served as a tool to diminish her sense of capability, her control over her immediate surroundings. The discernible psychological and behavioral ramifications for individuals consistently subjected to disrespectful communication are profound, particularly in high-conflict scenarios such as co-parenting. Psychologically, we observe elevated anxiety levels. Individuals become hypervigilant, perpetually scanning for perceived threats. They may develop depressive symptoms, feeling hopeless and drained. Self-esteem plummets, leading to a pervasive sense of worthlessness. Trust erodes, not only in the other person but also in oneself. Behaviorally, this can manifest in numerous ways. Some individuals withdraw, becoming reticent and passive, hesitant to engage. Others adopt a defensive posture, lashing out in a bid for self-protection. They may become indecisive, perpetually seeking reassurance. Within relationships, this can foster isolation as the individual avoids interactions likely to be fraught with negativity. Chronic stress may also manifest as physical ailments, such as headaches or gastrointestinal issues. For Sarah, the consequences were starkly evident. She began to eschew social engagements, feeling too depleted to interact with anyone. Her anxiety reached such a peak that sleep became elusive. She found herself snapping at her children over trivial matters, a behavior entirely alien to her previous disposition, and subsequently felt immense guilt. Her decision-making regarding even simple parenting choices became fraught with indecision, as Mark's disrespect had instilled a profound doubt in her own judgment. She was ensnared in a cycle of feeling attacked, reacting defensively, and then succumbing to guilt and exhaustion. Her capacity for healthy, constructive communication was severely compromised. The frame battle is the arena where these impacts are most acutely experienced. When an individual exhibits disrespect, they are attempting to impose their frame, their reality, their emotional tenor, their narrative upon you. By accepting their disrespect, you are, in essence, stepping into their frame. You are implicitly acknowledging the validity of their perception of you or the situation. This is why prevailing in the frame battle is so critical. It is about refusing to be drawn into their distorted reality. It is about steadfastly maintaining your own sense of self and your own perspective, even when confronted with attempts to dismantle them. When Mark dispatched those emails, his intention was to establish a frame depicting Sarah as a disorganized, forgetful parent requiring constant oversight. Sarah, by succumbing to anxiety and defensiveness, was frequently drawn into that frame. She began to behave as if she were disorganized and forgetful, because his words were instilling that feeling within her. She was fighting within his frame, attempting to defend herself against his accusations. This is the very essence of losing the frame battle. You end up contending on their terms, within their territory, and according to their rules. Comprehending the profound and often detrimental impact of disrespect is the initial, indispensable stride toward reclaiming your conversational agency. Once we recognize how these assaults erode our defenses and ensnare us in a cycle of emotional reactivity, we can commence exploring strategies that facilitate disengagement from the bait and the preservation of composure. The subsequent section will delve into the concept of the frame battle itself, dissecting the dynamics of these encounters and laying the groundwork for how AI can serve as your most potent ally in this struggle. 4. Strategies for emotional self-defense. When someone attempts to manipulate you, it is akin to them casting a sticky net, hoping to ensnare you within the confines of their emotional turbulence. Their objective is to elicit a reaction to provoke your indignation, to force your defense in a manner that inexorably draws you into their perceived reality, their singular viewpoint. This is the very essence of a frame battle. They endeavor to dictate the narrative, the emotional tenor, the very essence of the moment, by skillfully prodding your sensitivities. They employ words and actions precisely calibrated to evoke a specific emotional response, typically anger, hurt, or defensiveness. The paramount, perhaps most potent, stratagem for emotional self-preservation is the simple act of recognizing this bait for what it is. Envision it as spotting a fisherman's lure. You perceive its presence, acknowledge its intent, and consciously choose not to take the hook. The manipulator's pronouncements, their intonations, their accusations all are meticulously designed to ensnare you. They may distort your words, dredge up past failings, or draw specious comparisons. They might adopt the guise of a victim, attempting to instill guilt within you. Regardless of the specific tactic, the ultimate aim remains constant: to provoke an emotional response, to drag you into their chaotic, negativity-laden perspective. Upon grasping this fundamental dynamic, you can begin to perceive the manipulation for its true nature, a calculated maneuver devoid of any reflection upon your intrinsic worth or the objective reality of the situation. This recognition serves as the initial bulwark against their influence. It is akin to the deployment of a shield. You cease to be a passive target. You become an astute observer. You discern the underlying play, comprehend the strategic moves, and possess the agency to decline participation in their orchestrated drama. This dawning awareness fundamentally alters the landscape. It preempts your automatic descent into the vortex of their anger or sorrow. You can then assert and maintain your own emotional equilibrium, resolutely refusing to be subsumed by their manufactured turmoil. Once you have mastered the art of identifying the bait, the subsequent, critical phase involves cultivating emotional distance. This is not an invitation to stoicism or indifference. Rather, it is the deliberate creation of a salutary chasm between their provocations and your subsequent reaction. Picture the shock-absorbing mechanism of an automobile. When the vehicle encounters an uneven surface, the shock absorber dissipates the impact, thereby shielding the occupants from jarring jolts. Emotional detachment functions on a parallel principle. It is a strategic interlude, a moment wherein you consciously refrain from immediate, visceral response. This pause is profoundly efficacious. It forestalls impulsive actions or utterances that you might later regret. It affords your rational faculties the opportunity to reassert their dominion over your emotional impulses. When you eschew impulsive reactions, the body's inherent stress response, the fight-or-flight mechanism, so frequently triggered by manipulation, begins to subside. Your heart rate decelerates, your respiration deepens, and your cognitive clarity sharpens. This lucidity is indispensable for prevailing in the frame battle. It empowers you to contemplate your response strategically rather than merely reacting defensively. It represents the distinction between being swept away by a surging flood and standing resolutely on the riverbank, observing the torrent. You are no longer captive to the ebb and flow of emotional currents. You are the architect of your own reaction. This is where a formidable new ally emerges. Artificial intelligence, particularly sophisticated tools such as ChatGPT. Conceive of ChatGPT as your personal, dispassionate confidant, adept at navigating these intricate interpersonal exchanges. When confronted with a message designed to provoke, rather than succumbing to your own emotional surge, you can enlist ChatGPT to assist in formulating a measured reply. You input the manipulative message into the AI and then solicit its aid in crafting a response that is calm, factual, and assiduously avoids exacerbating the conflict. Consider its practical application. Suppose your former partner dispatches an email laden with invective and accusations concerning your stewardship of the children's schedules. Your immediate inclination might be to retaliate with an equally vitriolic email, a fervent defense of your actions coupled with a counterattack. However, this is precisely the outcome they desire. This is their victory in the frame battle. Instead, you can abstract their email and present it to ChatGPT with the prompt, "Please assist me in drafting a response to this email that is calm, factual, and focuses solely on the children's schedule. My aim is to circumvent an argument." ChatGPT, unburdened by sentiment, cannot be insulted or provoked. It possesses the capacity to analyze textual input and facilitate the creation of a response that achieves your objectives without entangling you in emotional complexities. This represents a revolutionary paradigm in self-defense. You are not engaging in a retaliatory conflagration, you are leveraging a sophisticated instrument to neutralize the emotional heat. This imparts objectivity. It enables you to maintain a consistent communication style, even when the other party is adrift in a sea of emotional volatility. Most critically, it deprives the manipulator of the emotional sustenance they crave. When they are denied the angry rejoinder they anticipated, their leverage frequently evaporates. The linchpin of successful AI-assisted emotional self-defense resides in the nature of the responses you generate. The overarching objective is to offer nothing to latch onto. This entails a demeanor that is polite yet resolute, grounded in fact, and steadfast in its assertion of boundaries. You aspire to be an unyielding, smooth bulwark. Their words may batter against you, but they will simply rebound. One highly effective methodology involves the deployment of factual recaps. When manipulation involves the distortion of agreements or facts, you can instruct ChatGPT to articulate them with unassailable clarity. For instance, you might solicit a response such as, In accordance with our co-parenting agreement dated date, the established protocol for holiday exchanges is as follows. This anchors the discourse in verifiable reality, distancing it from the realm of emotional accusations. Another potent approach lies in the establishment of unambiguous boundary statements. These are instrumental in reclaiming dominion over the conversational flow. You can enlist ChatGPT to help you articulate these with a delicate yet unwavering firmness. Envision a response along these lines. I acknowledge your concerns, but moving forward, I will exclusively address matters pertaining to the children's welfare and schedule. This clearly delineates the parameters of acceptable discourse and redirects the conversation toward productive avenues. At times, a straightforward request for clarification proves remarkably effective. If the manipulator employs vagueness or excessive emotionality, you can prompt ChatGPT to assist in formulating a query such as, "Could you please rephrase that in a manner that is constructive and oriented toward resolving specific issue?" This shifts the onus back to them to communicate with greater efficacy, while simultaneously signaling your willingness to engage, albeit on reasonable terms. And then there are the most elemental acknowledgments. On occasion, minimal utterance suffices. A response such as, "I have received your message and will give it due consideration," or "Thank you for your input," can be entirely adequate. These indicate receipt without implying assent to the content or validating the emotional undertone. They are courteous, neutral, and provide no discernible emotional anchor. The fundamental tenet underpinning these strategies is that by responding in a manner that is neutral, factual, and boundary-conscious, you actively decline to participate in the manipulator's emotional theater. You refrain from adopting a defensive posture. You do not engage in reciprocal aggression. You simply articulate your position and resolutely refuse to be drawn into their maelstrom. This is the mechanism by which you consistently win the frame battle. Victory is not achieved through an overwhelming emotional onslaught. It is secured by refusing to engage in their game, by maintaining an unshakable equilibrium, and by offering them no purchase for their machinations. How does the emotional state of the individual subjected to manipulation render them susceptible to particular tactics, and how does the recognition of this vulnerability serve as the initial step in disarming the manipulator? When we are already experiencing elevated stress, fatigue, or a pervasive sense of insecurity, our emotional defenses are inherently compromised. A manipulator possesses an uncanny ability to detect this. They may exploit your exhaustion by presenting demands that you lack the fortitude to refuse. They may prey upon your insecurities by issuing criticisms that strike a particularly raw nerve. For instance, if you have recently encountered a professional setback and are experiencing feelings of inadequacy, a manipulator might deploy phrases such as, "You invariably botch things," or "You cannot even manage this simple task." The recognition of this inherent vulnerability is paramount. It is not an indictment of your susceptibility, rather, it is an understanding that these tactics are deliberately engineered to exploit common human emotional landscapes. When you realize, they are articulating this because I am currently feeling vulnerable regarding X, you can begin to decouple yourself from the insult. You can perceive it as a stratagem aimed at your present emotional condition, rather than an accurate assessment of your capabilities. This realization empowers you to articulate, "Very well, I comprehend your objective. You are attempting to leverage my current feelings against me." This awareness is profoundly empowering. It fundamentally alters the power dynamic. Instead of being a victim of their pronouncements, you transition into an informed observer. You can then elect to either address the underlying vulnerability with self-compassion or simply dismiss the manipulative remark as an opportunistic exploitation of it. This encapsulates the essence of disarming them. You perceive their weapon, comprehend its modus operandi, and consciously choose not to be wounded by it. Beyond the mere generation of text, what are the underlying principles of effective AI-assisted emotional self-defense that enable a user To consistently win the frame battle without resorting to counter-aggression? The foundational principle is de-escalation through detachment. AI facilitates this detachment by externalizing the emotional burden of response. Instead of your own emotions dictating your reply, you are employing a tool to ensure your response is strategically sound. The AI functions as a sophisticated filter, stripping the emotional charge from the interaction. Another cardinal principle is consistency and boundary maintenance. Manipulators routinely test the limits of established boundaries. They may intensify their efforts if they perceive any wavering. AI can assist you in sustaining a uniform, firm tone across a series of interactions. You can utilize identical prompts and refine them iteratively, ensuring that your responses invariably adhere to your predefined boundaries. This predictable adherence is profoundly disconcerting to a manipulator who thrives on emotional chaos. Furthermore, AI cultivates strategic communication. It compels you to contemplate what you aim to achieve with your response, rather than simply reacting. Do you require the acquisition of information? Is it imperative to establish a boundary? Is a simple acknowledgement of receipt sufficient? By engaging with AI, you are prompted to adopt a more deliberate and goal-oriented approach to communication, a hallmark of successfully navigating the frame battle. You are not participating in a tit-for-tat emotional exchange, you are managing the interaction with a clearly defined objective. This focus on strategy, as opposed to reactive impulse, is what enables you to consistently win the frame battle without recourse to counter-aggression. You triumph by refusing to engage in their game, by steadfastly resisting assimilation into their emotional arena, and by steering the discourse toward a more rational and productive trajectory, all facilitated by an intelligent instrument. The adept application of these strategies can engender a profound transformation. You are no longer buffeted by the emotional tempests of others. You are acquiring the capacity to navigate these storms with enhanced composure and control. But what transpires when the manipulator becomes cognizant of your newfound equanimity? What if they prove unyielding in their efforts? This is a critical inquiry, as your success in disarming them might, paradoxically, precipitate an escalation on their part. Understanding how to manage these potential reactions becomes the subsequent vital step in safeguarding your emotional well-being. 5. Using AI to navigate difficult interactions. Navigating fraught conversations can feel akin to traversing a minefield. A single utterance, barbed and sharp, can pierce through your defenses, igniting a sense of injustice or outright fury. It's that distinct sensation, isn't it, when someone seems intent on prodding your most sensitive buttons? They might distort your words, unearth old wounds, or hurl baseless accusations. This is the insidious art of the bait. And all too often, without even a flicker of conscious awareness, we take it. We become defensive, lash out, or retreat into silence. In that instant, control evaporates. We are no longer masters of our own emotional terrain, but unwilling participants in their tempestuous world. This is the response trap, the very mechanism manipulators rely upon. They thrive on witnessing your agitation, your disarray, your anger, for it is the currency of their power. It signifies their triumph in shifting the discourse to their terms, their personal arena of emotional warfare. Consider the strained exchanges common in co-parenting. Perhaps the subject is a child's pickup schedule, a school form, or a behavioral issue. The other parent might commence with a pronouncement like, "You always mishandle this," or "Are you even remotely capable of executing this correctly?" These are not inquiries seeking genuine information. Their sole purpose is to cultivate a feeling of inadequacy, to provoke a defensive posture. Your immediate internal retort might be, "That's utterly untrue. I make every effort." And with that, you are ensnared. You begin to defend yourself, to explain, perhaps even to counterattack. In that moment, the true objective, the practical matter at hand, is lost. You've been drawn into a frame battle, where their aim is to diminish you, and your sole focus becomes proving them wrong, rather than calmly addressing the issue. You relinquish command of the conversation, becoming a pawn to their emotional onslaught. This is precisely where a formidable new ally emerges: artificial intelligence, specifically tools like ChatGPT. It may seem counterintuitive to enlist technology in the navigation of deeply human emotions, but envision AI as a sophisticated, dispassionate intermediary. When confronted with a message designed to provoke, instead of a gut-driven, immediate reply, you can pause. You can present that message to ChatGPT and solicit its assistance in crafting a considered response. This simple act of delegation erects a vital psychological chasm. It is akin to stepping away from a heated argument to draw a deep, restorative breath. You are no longer directly exposed to the barrage. You are not immediately absorbing the emotional fallout of the other person's words. This pause, facilitated by AI, is indispensable in averting that instant, reactive emotional entanglement. It grants your cognitive faculties the necessary time to synchronize with your emotions, paving the way for a more measured, less emotionally compromised interaction. The manipulator's strategy is predicated on eliciting an emotional response. Their objective is to dictate the frame of the conversation to ensnare you within their narrative of blame, victimhood, or wrath. By engaging AI to assist in your reply, you deny them this gratification. You refuse to participate in their game. Rather than mirroring their anger or defensiveness, you can generate a response that is characterized by calm, factual precision, and a singular focus on the essential practicalities. You are, in essence, communicating, "I recognize your attempts to bait me, but I will not take the hook." You are deliberately abstaining from being drawn into their chaotic emotional vortex. Your frame, bolstered by AI, remains one of composure, rationality, and clearly demarcated boundaries. You offer them no purchase, no fuel for their emotional conflagration. Let us dissect the practical application of this approach. It extends far beyond a simple request to ChatGPT to draft an angry email or tell them off. Such an endeavor would represent a regression into the very trap we seek to avoid. True efficacy lies in the strategic deployment of AI. Upon receiving a manipulative message, you can introduce it into ChatGPT and request its aid in analyzing the input. You can prompt it to identify the emotional triggers, the accusations, or the attempts at provocation. For instance, you might articulate, "This message feels intensely aggressive and accusatory. Could you assist me in discerning the primary emotional bait being employed here, and suggest a factual response that avoids defensiveness?" ChatGPT can then facilitate the deconstruction of the message. It can pinpoint phrases such as "you always" or "you never" as generalizations designed to induce guilt or a sense of inadequacy. It can highlight instances of insult or passive-aggressive commentary. Once the bait has been identified, you can then instruct ChatGPT to assist in formulating a response that effectively neutralizes it. This implies that the AI-generated response should embody the following attributes. 1. Factual accuracy. It adheres strictly to verifiable information. If the subject pertains to a child's homework, the response concentrates on the homework itself, eschewing any assignment of blame for its incompletion. 2. Neutrality of tone. It eschews emotive language, sarcasm, or accusatory phrasing. It maintains a demeanor of polite firmness. 3. Brevity. It addresses only the indispensable points. It refrains from engaging in protracted explanations or justifications that are susceptible to distortion. 4. Boundary setting. It unequivocally communicates what you are willing and unwilling to engage with. Consider this hypothetical scenario. Your co-parent dispatches a text message, "I cannot fathom that you neglected to sign Leo's permission slip yet again." This is precisely the root of our difficulties. This is a quintessential example of bait. The inclusion of "again" implies a pattern of failure, and the assertion "this is precisely the root of our difficulties" serves to magnify a single oversight into a broader relational breakdown. Instead of responding with, "I didn't forget," My plate was overflowing, and you know how hectic things are. Or it's not my fault. You didn't remind me either. You could turn to ChatGPT. You might pose the question, how can I respond to this message regarding the permission slip without appearing defensive or accusatory, and simply confirm that I will handle it? ChatGPT might offer a suggestion along these lines. Thank you for bringing the permission slip to my attention. I will sign it today and ensure it is returned to school. Observe the multifaceted impact of this AI-assisted response. It acknowledges the information. Thank you for bringing the permission slip to my attention. This conveys politeness and confirms receipt of the message. It articulates a clear course of action. I will sign it today and ensure it is returned to school. This is pragmatic and resolves the immediate concern. It deliberately disregards the bait. There is no defense, no counteraccusation, no justification. The statement "this is precisely the root of our difficulties" is met with silence, effectively deflating the manipulator's attempt at escalation. The word "again" is also left unaddressed, preempting any descent into a debate about past events. This encapsulates the essence of prevailing in the frame battle with the assistance of AI. You are consciously opting out of engaging with the emotional drama. You are resolutely denying the other party the opportunity to destabilize you. The AI functions as your dispassionate, rational counsel, guiding you in formulating a response that preserves your own calm and control. What transpires when the manipulator, thwarted by the ineffectiveness of their bait, escalates their tactics? They may intensify their pressure. Fine, then don't bother. Clearly, Leo is not a priority for you. This is a common stratagem. When their initial attempts to elicit an emotional reaction proves fruitless, they augment the pressure, hoping to coerce a response. This is precisely where maintaining your AI-assisted composure becomes even more paramount. If you persist in responding with factual accuracy and a neutral tone, you are withholding the very element they crave: your emotional energy. Your calm, AI-generated responses act as an impervious shield. They cannot penetrate your equanimity. They cannot leverage your anger or distress against you. Each instance of refusing the bait diminishes their capacity to control the interaction. You are, in effect, winning the frame battle by refusing to enter the arena they have constructed. You are demonstrating the futility of their emotional tactics. The cognitive and emotional dividends of this detachment are profound. When you are not reacting on an emotional level, your brain can operate with heightened efficacy. You can think with clarity, make superior decisions, and communicate with greater precision. The stress and anxiety that frequently accompany these interactions are substantially mitigated because you are not perpetually feeling besieged or overwhelmed. You reclaim a sense of agency. Rather than feeling like a victim of another's emotional manipulation, you become an active participant in orchestrating the conversation, employing a tool to fortify your emotional self-defense. Consider the internal process. When you receive a manipulative message, your limbic system, the region of your brain associated with emotions, may become highly active. You experience a surge of anger, fear, or hurt. This is the manifestation of the fight or flight response. In the absence of a deliberate strategy, this surge can precipitate impulsive, emotionally driven actions. By pausing and utilizing AI, you engage your prefrontal cortex, the rational faculty of your brain. You create a crucial interval between the emotional stimulus and your response. This interval empowers you to consciously select your reaction rather than being dictated by your immediate feelings. AI serves as the bridge across this chasm, offering a structured methodology for formulating a response that aligns with your intention to remain calm and in control. The pivotal insight is to perceive ChatGPT not as a magical panacea, but as an exceptionally sophisticated assistant in the realm of emotional self-defense. It is about harnessing its capacity for language processing and text generation to facilitate the attainment of your objectives, preserving composure, establishing boundaries, and resolving practical matters without emotional compromise. It is about transforming a potential emotional ambush into a controlled, manageable interaction. By mastering the art of employing AI in this manner, you are not merely navigating difficult conversations, you are actively disarming emotional manipulation and reclaiming your inner peace. By comprehending how AI can serve as a potent ally in deflecting emotional assaults and preserving our own grounded perspective, we have taken a significant stride toward regaining control. Nevertheless, the efficacy of this strategy is contingent upon our capacity not only to perceive the manipulation, but also to actively shape the narrative. The ensuing section will delve more deeply into the art of actively framing our interactions to ensure that our needs and boundaries are not only safeguarded, but also unequivocally articulated. Chapter 2. Regaining Control and Stability. 1. Maintaining emotional detachment. When someone endeavors to elicit a potent emotional response from you, stoking your anger, defensiveness, or distress, they are, in essence, attempting to ensnare you. This is the art of emotional baiting. Envision a fisherman casting a line, the lure glinting with an irresistible promise. Their objective is not a placid dialogue, but rather to provoke a bite, to elicit an emotional reaction, thereby drawing you into their orbit, their perspective. In high-conflict environments, particularly within the realm of co-parenting, this bait can manifest in myriad forms. It might be a personal slight, a baseless accusation concerning your character, or a stratagem designed to erode your grasp on reality or memory, a phenomenon some label gaslighting. They may resort to threats or, more insidiously, adopt the mantle of victimhood, seeking to imbue you with guilt and a sense of responsibility for their disquiet. At times, they will resurrect past disputes or transgressions, hoping to rekindle old wounds and draw you back into a familiar, agonizing choreography. All these maneuvers are engineered to seize control of your feelings. When they succeed, your capacity for lucid thought, for measured response, and for maintaining command of the discourse evaporates. This is the crux of a frame battle. They aspire to dictate the emotional climate, and your reaction grants them victory in that skirmish. Succumbing to that bait carries a significant cost. The instant you retaliate with anger, adopt an overly defensive posture, or capitulate to guilt, you forfeit your equilibrium. Your judgment becomes clouded. Rather than progressing toward a resolution, the conflict escalates, frequently devolving into a state far more calamitous than the initial issue. You may utter words you later regret, pronouncements that cannot be rescinded and can be wielded against you. Most crucially, by reacting, you relinquish the reins of the conversation. You are no longer charting the course, you are being dragged along by the other party's agenda. They have established the emotional terrain, and you find yourself ensnared within it. This is precisely the outcome the aggressor desires. Your emotional outburst validates their tactics, it signals their success, and emboldens them to deploy the same stratagems anew. You become a pawn in their game, responding to their moves rather than initiating your own. When trapped in this cycle, you are not the arbiter of the frame. The other person has firmly imposed it, and you are merely struggling to remain afloat. This is where emotional detachment emerges as your most formidable defense. It is not an invitation to become cold, unfeeling, or apathetic. It is a deliberate, strategic decision to observe and respond without allowing the provocations of another to consume you. Consider it akin to stepping back from a raging inferno to observe it from a secure vantage point, rather than plunging into the conflagration. Detachment cultivates a crucial psychological chasm between an event and your response to it. This interstitial space permits a clear assessment of the situation, an unmasking of the tactics for what they are, and the selection of a response that serves your best interests, rather than one dictated by raw emotion. It is about reclaiming your inner equilibrium. When detached, you are not easily swayed by insults or accusations. You recognize the bait for what it is, an attempt at manipulation, and choose not to engage. This capacity for composure and objectivity forms the bedrock of triumph in any frame battle. It thwarts the opponent's quest for leverage, which they desperately seek through your emotional turmoil. Now, envision receiving a message engineered to send you into a spiral. It is replete with accusations, perhaps even threats. Your primal urge is to retaliate, to defend yourself, to unleash your own fury. But instead of composing that incandescent reply, you pause. You take that provocative message and deposit it into ChatGPT. Suddenly, you are no longer engaged in a direct confrontation with the emotional onslaught. You are deferring it to a tool. This simple act of pausing and employing AI precipitates a critical shift. You are no longer immersed in the immediate emotional tempest. You are observing it from a modicum of distance. You are engaging your analytical faculties, posing the question, how can I respond to this without becoming entangled in the drama? ChatGPT becomes your training ground. You can solicit its assistance in formulating a response that is factual, temperate, and concise. For instance, should the message contain an accusation, you might ask ChatGPT to aid you in crafting a reply that simply articulates the facts, devoid of apology or animosity. This process of leveraging AI to construct your reply trains you to resist the impulsive urge to react. It is akin to having a coach guide you through a challenging conversation before it actually transpires. Furthermore, when you enlist AI to formulate a neutral response, you deny the baiter the emotional sustenance they crave. Frequently, when one seeks to provoke you, their aim is to witness your distress. Your calm, fact-based response, meticulously drafted with AI's assistance, is akin to a dousing of cold water on their fervor. They may even intensify their efforts, becoming more insistent or aggressive, precisely because you have not reacted as anticipated. This is where detachment truly takes hold. You can observe their heightened intensity from your newly established emotional remove. You perceive that their tactics are proving ineffective, and this observation reinforces the efficacy of your strategy. You are learning to witness their game without becoming a participant. This is not about suppressing your feelings. It is about electing not to permit them to dictate your actions. It is about recognizing that your emotional state is your own, and you possess the power to safeguard it. Let us delve deeper into how the act of taking the bait directly empowers the manipulator and leads to a loss of control. Consider a co-parenting scenario. Sarah's ex-partner, Mark, habitually dispatches emails laden with passive-aggressive commentary on her parenting, artfully disguised as concerns. For example, he might write, "I simply hope the children are not unduly burdened by the plethora of extracurricular activities you have enrolled them in. I recall when I was their age, we had more time for mere childhood. Perhaps a less demanding schedule would prove more beneficial for their development." Sarah's immediate impulse is anger. She feels assailed, misunderstood, and compelled to defend herself. She yearns to unleash a torrent of words, enumerating the educational advantages of those pursuits and reminding Mark that she is the primary caregiver. If she succumbs to this urge, she has taken the bait. Mark has successfully framed the discourse around her supposed overscheduling and her potentially detrimental parenting choices. He now has her on the defensive, and she has forfeited the opportunity to address genuine issues such as the children's well-being in a calm, rational manner. Her emotional outburst bestows power upon him. He can point to her overreaction as evidence of her instability or her inability to engage in rational discourse. He has triumphed in the frame battle by rendering her reactive and defensive. Now, contrast this with how Sarah could employ AI to foster detachment. Instead of immediately dispatching an irate email, she copies Mark's message into ChatGPT. She might then prompt ChatGPT to assist her in drafting a response that is neutral and focuses solely on the children's needs, without addressing his passive-aggressive tone or veiled criticism. A potential AI-assisted response could read, "Thank you for sharing your thoughts. I will remain mindful of the children's overall schedule and well-being as we plan their activities. Should you have specific concerns regarding their stress levels or development, please communicate them so we may engage in constructive discussion." This response is succinct, factual, and entirely devoid of emotional language. It does not engage with his bait. When Mark receives this, he may experience frustration because he has not elicited the angry reaction he sought. He might even escalate, dispatching another email demanding to know why Sarah is not taking his concern seriously. But Sarah, having already processed his initial message through AI and drafted a placid reply, is now prepared. She can observe his heightened intensity from a detached perspective. She perceives that his tactics are failing to destabilize her, and this reinforces her resolve to maintain her calm, strategic approach. She has not suppressed her anger. She has channeled it into a strategy that safeguards her emotional space and keeps the conversation focused on what truly matters. The specific mechanisms by which delegating the initial drafting of her response to ChatGPT facilitate emotional detachment are profound and diverge significantly from the mere act of attempting to calm down. When you endeavor to calm down before responding, you are still grappling with raw emotion. You are wrestling with your anger, attempting to suppress it or internally rationalize it away. This can be exhausting and often proves ineffective, particularly when the provocation is intense. You may believe you are calm, but the underlying agitation can still permeate your words, rendering your response strained or defensive. Conversely, employing ChatGPT to draft your response creates a deliberate interlude. It is an externalization of the communication process. You are not solely attempting to manage your internal state. You are actively utilizing a tool to shape your external communication in a manner that precludes emotional entanglement. You are outsourcing the immediate, emotionally charged drafting phase. This allows you to step back and observe the situation with greater objectivity. You are no longer solely preoccupied with your own feelings. Your focus shifts to the message you wish to convey and the strategy you intend to implement. ChatGPT serves as a buffer, enabling you to process the bait without being consumed by it. It assists you in crafting a response that aligns with your objectives, rather than your immediate emotional impulses. This constitutes a proactive form of emotional self-defense, rather than a mere reactive attempt to regulate feelings. What are the observable psychological and behavioral transformations that occur in an individual when they successfully practice emotional detachment, and how does this alter the power dynamic in a frame battle? Psychologically, the individual begins to experience a profound sense of inner tranquility and command. The persistent anxiety and stress associated with anticipating or reacting to conflict diminish. They feel less depleted, as their energy is no longer being siphoned off by emotional turmoil. Their focus sharpens, and their capacity for critical and strategic thinking improves. They commence to perceive situations with greater clarity, recognizing patterns of manipulation, and comprehending the underlying dynamics at play. Behaviorally, this translates into a more measured and consistent demeanor. They become less prone to engaging in heated arguments, more adept at establishing boundaries, and more effective at steering conversations toward productive outcomes. Their communication becomes more concise, factual, and less susceptible to emotional outbursts. They may appear more assured and less easily flustered, even when confronted with aggression. This shift in the power dynamic within a frame battle is dramatic. When you are reactive, the manipulator wields the power. They dictate the terms of engagement, and you are merely responding to their cues. Your emotional state is their weapon. However, when you practice emotional detachment, you reclaim that power. You are no longer a puppet dancing to their tune. You become the observer, the strategist. The manipulator's tactics lose their potency because you refuse to provide the anticipated emotional reaction. Their attempts to provoke you fall flat, leaving them frustrated and often disarmed. The frame of the battle shifts from an emotional free-for-all to a more controlled, rational exchange, or even a stalemate, where the manipulator's efforts are simply disregarded. You are no longer fighting their battle on their terms. You are establishing your own terms, safeguarding your emotional well-being, and directing the interaction toward a resolution that serves your objectives, not theirs. You are no longer a participant in their emotional chaos, you are the architect of your own composure. By comprehending the mechanics of emotional baiting and actively cultivating detachment, a process significantly amplified by tools such as ChatGPT, we begin to dismantle the adversary's primary weapon. This newfound internal stability is not merely about navigating difficult conversations. It represents the essential initial step toward proactively shaping the narrative and reclaiming our agency. The subsequent crucial element in this process is learning to articulate our needs and boundaries with clarity and firmness, ensuring that our detached stance translates into effective, goal-oriented interactions. 2. Leveraging AI for co-parenting challenges. The landscape of co-parenting, particularly when fraught with high conflict, can often feel like a perpetual battlefield. It is a domain where emotions surge, words inflict deep wounds, and one is frequently ensnared in a vortex of negativity. A message might arrive, seemingly crafted to prod at your vulnerabilities, to elicit a reaction of anger or hurt. This is rarely accidental. It is often a calculated maneuver to seize control of the situation, to ensnare you within their emotional framework. This is the crux of the frame battle, a struggle to dictate the narrative, the tone, and the very reality of the interaction. When one parent attempts to drag you into their tempest of frustration or blame, victory lies in remaining steadfast on your own solid ground, refusing to be swept away. Here, an unexpected ally emerges: artificial intelligence. While it may sound unconventional, tools such as ChatGPT can become your clandestine weapon in these emotionally charged exchanges. Envision it as possessing a dispassionate, objective assistant, capable of helping you process arduous messages and formulate responses that safeguard your peace. This is not about evading communication, rather, it is about engaging in a manner that prioritizes your well-being and the paramount interests of your children, without compromising your own emotional equilibrium. One of the most potent ways AI can assist is by functioning as an emotional buffer. When a message from your co-parent arrives, laden with accusations or demands designed to provoke, your immediate inclination might be to retaliate instantly. This is precisely the outcome the other party may anticipate. They aim to draw you into their frame to compel an emotional response. Instead, imagine entrusting that message to ChatGPT. You can instruct it to simply process the information, to grasp the presented facts, devoid of their emotional baggage. This simple act of delegation establishes a crucial distance. You are not immediately confronting raw emotion, you are observing it from a secure vantage point. This pause, this moment of detachment, is invaluable. It permits you to perceive the message for what it is: words on a screen rather than an immediate personal assault. You can then review the AI's output with a significantly clearer mind, liberated from the immediate sting of provocation. This stepping back is the inaugural stride in refusing to be drawn into their emotional chaos. This detachment is fundamental to recognizing the bait so often laid within these communications. Co-parents embroiled in high conflict can be adept at emotional manipulation. They might employ guilt trips, exaggerated claims, or personal disparagements, all intended to elicit a specific emotional response from you. AI can be an extraordinary instrument for dissecting these tactics. You can input a co-parent's message into ChatGPT and request it to identify any language that appears accusatory, manipulative, or designed to incite anger or guilt. For instance, you might inquire, "Can you analyze this message and identify any parts that seem intended to make me feel guilty or angry? Or does this message contain personal attacks or assumptions about my intentions?" By having the AI dissect the language, you begin to discern the patterns of manipulation with greater clarity. It is akin to having a translator who can not only convert words, but also reveal the underlying emotional intent. This analytical function empowers you. Instead of merely feeling attacked and bewildered, you start to comprehend why the message feels difficult. You can recognize the bait for what it is, and that recognition is the precursor to not taking the hook. Once the emotional bait is understood, the subsequent critical step is to formulate a response that neutralizes it. This is where AI truly excels in aiding you to win the frame battle. Rather than reacting with your own emotions, you can leverage ChatGPT to draft responses that are calm, factual, and centered on what truly matters, the well-being of your children. You can prompt the AI to generate messages that are strictly businesslike, disregarding any personal barbs. For example, you might state, "Draft a response to this email that addresses only the practical arrangements for the children's upcoming visit. Please disregard all personal opinions or criticisms and focus solely on scheduling and logistics." This directs the AI to strip away the emotional content and concentrate on essential information. Furthermore, you can instruct the AI to ensure the tone is neutral and professional. If a message is replete with accusatory language, you can request, "Rewrite this message to be polite and professional," removing any blaming words or accusatory phrases. The objective is to be clear and respectful, even if the original message was not. This process assists you in transforming a potentially explosive exchange into a measured, business-like communication. This is not about being cold or unfeeling. It is about establishing a boundary. It is about communicating in a manner that prevents the other person from ensnaring you in their emotional drama. The efficacy of these AI-assisted responses lies in their capacity to reinforce boundaries without direct confrontation. When your co-parent is accustomed to eliciting an emotional reaction from you, and instead receives a calm, fact-based reply that adheres to established communication protocols, their tactics begin to lose their potency. They are attempting to draw you into their frame of anger or distress, but your AI-assisted response refuses to enter that frame. You are, in essence, winning the frame battle by declining to engage in their game. This strategy de-escalates conflict not by placating the other person, but by denying them the emotional sustenance they seek. It conserves your own emotional energy, which is far too precious to be expended on endless, unproductive disputes. Consider the psychological advantages of this process. When you are perpetually bombarded with emotionally charged messages, it exacts a toll. It can foster anxiety, stress, and a sense of helplessness. By delegating the initial drafting of responses to AI, you are, in effect, granting yourself permission to step away from the immediate emotional impact. You are creating a mental space wherein you can observe the situation with greater objectivity. This process of detachment is profoundly empowering. It helps you reclaim a sense of control in a dynamic that often feels beyond your grasp. You are no longer a reactive participant. You are a strategic communicator. You are choosing how and when to engage, and you are doing so from a position of enhanced calm and clarity. This internal shift is instrumental in building emotional resilience. It is about safeguarding your inner peace, even when external communication proves challenging. Let us envision Sarah. Sarah was navigating a co-parenting situation that felt like a perpetual tempest. Her ex-partner, Mark, had a predilection for sending emails late at night, laden with passive-aggressive remarks and thinly veiled insults. Regarding her parenting, Sarah would lie awake, replaying his words, a knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. She would frequently fire back an angry email, inevitably leading to further exchanges, leaving her exhausted and feeling like a failure. One evening, after receiving a particularly barbed message concerning their daughter's homework, Sarah resolved to try a different approach. She copied Mark's email into ChatGPT and typed, "Draft a calm, factual response to this email. Focus solely on the homework issue and suggest a specific time for me to discuss it with our daughter. Ignore all personal comments and accusations." Within moments, ChatGPT generated a response. It was polite, direct, and entirely devoid of the emotional reactivity that Sarah typically felt compelled to express. It simply stated, "Thank you for your message regarding daughter's name's homework. I would be happy to discuss this with her this evening after dinner, around 7 p.m. Please let me know if that time works for you." Sarah read it, took a deep breath, and sent it. Mark's immediate, irate reply did not materialize. Instead, a simple fine arrived the following morning. It was a minor triumph, but for Sarah, it felt monumental. She had not engaged in the conflict. She had not allowed his attempts to draw her into his frame of anger and blame to succeed. She had employed AI to construct a shield, to respond with logic rather than emotion, and in doing so, she had reclaimed control of her own peace. This is not about evading difficult conversations or feigning the non-existence of problems. It is about discerning how you confront those problems. When you utilize AI to assist in drafting your responses, you are essentially establishing a more neutral communication channel. You are ensuring that your messages are anchored in facts and focused on solutions rather than becoming lost in the emotional crossfire. This approach is particularly effective in circumstances where one parent consistently attempts to control the narrative through emotional manipulation. By consistently responding with measured, AI-assisted communication, you deny them the satisfaction of eliciting an emotional reaction. You refuse to be drawn into their frame battle. The ethical considerations here are significant, yet they lean towards empowerment. Employing AI to enhance your communication and protect your emotional well-being is not about deception. It is about self-preservation. You are utilizing a tool to manage a challenging personal situation. The AI is not formulating the core decisions or the fundamental truths. It is assisting you in articulating them in a manner less likely to escalate conflict. It is about ensuring that your communication remains focused on the children's needs and logistical realities, rather than being sidetracked by personal grievances. The objective is to preserve your own emotional integrity and to foster a more stable, predictable communication environment even if the other party remains entrenched in their own frame. By strategically deploying AI as an instrument for emotional detachment and measured communication, parents can commence the dismantling of that conflict cycle in co-parenting. However, this newfound composure and control are not solely about managing external interactions. They serve as the bedrock for cultivating internal resilience. The subsequent step involves exploring how this external strategy translates into the development of robust internal emotional defenses, ensuring that, even when AI is not actively mediating, you remain grounded and empowered. 3. Building resilience in contentious situations. When someone endeavors to pierce your composure, it is akin to them launching tiny projectiles, hoping one will strike with sufficient precision to elicit a flinch. Their aim is not necessarily to inflict profound injury, but rather to witness your reaction, to ensnare you within the vortex of their own disquiet. This phenomenon is known as emotional baiting, a tactic frequently employed in contentious exchanges, particularly when emotions run high, such as in co-parenting disputes or other fraught circumstances. The baiter might utter a barbed remark, lodge an unfounded accusation, or distort your words. Their objective is to ignite within you feelings of anger, defensiveness, or sorrow, thereby clouding your judgment and compelling you to respond from a place of raw emotion. Often, this behavior stems from their own insecurities or a compulsion for control. It is seldom a personal indictment, though it may feel so when you are the recipient. They may resurrect past transgressions, employ inflammatory rhetoric, or even attempt to undermine your grasp on reality, a practice commonly termed gaslighting. The insidious nature of this dynamic lies in the fact that by taking the bait, we surrender our equilibrium. Instead of maintaining equanimity and focus, we are drawn into their tempestuous emotional landscape. Consider this: when you become agitated, your thoughts race, clarity eludes you, and you may utter sentiments you later regret. This invariably exacerbates the situation. The dispute can escalate uncontrollably, with both parties entrenched in their positions, rendering a resolution increasingly elusive. For you, the consequence is depletion, anxiety, and perhaps even self-doubt. You may feel vanquished, not because your position was untenable, but because you allowed your emotions to dictate your actions. The baiter, meanwhile, often perceives victory not through resolution, but by successfully shattering your peace and eliciting the desired response. This is the essence of losing a frame battle. You have been subsumed by their narrative, their emotional state, and have relinquished command of the interaction. However, here lies the encouraging truth. Resilience in such trying circumstances is not an innate endowment, but a cultivated skill, akin to mastering the art of cycling or a musical instrument. The more diligently you practice, the more formidable you become. It is about fortifying your inner fortitude, so that when someone attempts to prod your vulnerabilities, you do not reflexively retaliate. A significant component of this skill involves creating a deliberate chasm between another's utterance and your internal response. This is emotional detachment, enabling you to perceive the situation with objective clarity rather than being swept away by the emotional currents it generates. Imagine yourself as a scientist observing an experiment, rather than an integral part of the experiment itself. To achieve this, self-awareness is paramount. What are your sensitive points? What types of remarks or scenarios tend to trigger your reactions? Identifying these triggers is the inaugural step toward their management. So, how do we commence the arduous task of building this internal fortitude, even before considering the deployment of specialized stratagems? One profoundly effective method is the practice of mindful observation. Rather than immediately perceiving yourself as under attack, endeavor to step back and survey the exchange from a detached vantage point. Pose the question, what is this individual truly endeavoring to achieve? Are they seeking to provoke me? Are they attempting to commandeer the discourse? Perceiving their actions as a deliberate strategy rather than a personal affront can significantly diminish their potency. This paradigm shift is instrumental in prevailing in the frame battle. It is about recognizing that their conduct is a reflection of them and their agenda, not an accurate assessment of your intrinsic worth or the verity of the situation. Another pivotal measure is the establishment of boundaries, both internally and, when judicious, externally. This entails predetermining the scope of discussion you are willing to engage in and what lies beyond that purview. Should a conversation devolve into personal invective or the dredging up of long-past grievances, you possess the prerogative to steer it back to the primary subject or, if necessary, to terminate it altogether. These are not fortresses designed to repel individuals, but rather navigational aids to safeguard your well-being and ensure the interaction remains constructive. When your boundaries are clearly defined, upholding them becomes more facile when confronted with attempts to transgress them. Furthermore, it is extraordinarily beneficial to maintain a clear vision of your ultimate objectives. In the realm of co-parenting, for instance, your paramount goal is likely the welfare of your children and the efficient management of their logistical needs. When an individual endeavors to draw you into an emotional conflagration, ask yourself, will succumbing to agitation at this juncture advance my objectives for my children? The answer is almost invariably no. Concentrating on your aims serves as an anchor, keeping you grounded amidst turbulent circumstances. It serves as a potent reminder of what truly matters, fortifying your resolve against the allure of another's manufactured drama. In the crucible of the moment, when you feel yourself succumbing to overwhelming emotion, simple self-soothing techniques can prove to be a veritable lifeline. Engaging in a few slow, deliberate breaths can profoundly pacify your nervous system. If feasible, consider briefly pausing the conversation to gather your thoughts. Even a fleeting moment of quietude can aid in regaining your composure. These minor actions function as nascent safety nets, catching you before you plunge too deeply into an emotional reaction. Comprehending the intent underlying emotional baiting represents a formidable avenue for recalibrating your perception. When an individual deliberately seeks to instigate a reaction, their underlying motive is to manipulate you into adopting their emotional framework. They desire you to experience what they wish you to experience, thereby enabling them to exert control over the situation. Recognizing this as a calculated stratagem, rather than a genuine expression of their feelings or a valid critique of your actions, can be profoundly liberating. It transmutes the interaction from a personal assault into a tactical maneuver on their part. You can then apprehend it as a game they are attempting to play, and you can consciously opt out of their prescribed rules. This understanding facilitates detachment, as you realize their pronouncements are engineered to elicit a specific response, and you possess the agency to withhold it. Instead of succumbing to hurt or anger, you may experience a sense of lucidity, or even a measure of pity, for someone who feels compelled to resort to such methods. This is not an endorsement of their conduct, but rather a liberation from the internalization of their negativity. You cease to be the target of their ire and instead become an observer of their machinations. Beyond the mere act of not reacting, genuine resilience in the face of persistent emotional provocation necessitates several internal shifts in perspective and mindset. It entails cultivating a profound sense of self-worth that is independent of external validation or the comportment of others. This means understanding that another's disrespectful words or deeds do not diminish your inherent value. Resilience also involves fostering a robust sense of agency, the conviction that you possess the power to select your response, irrespective of external conditions. It is about acknowledging that while you cannot dictate the actions or utterances of others, you possess absolute dominion over your reaction to them. This internal locus of control forms the bedrock of resilience. Furthermore, it encompasses the practice of self-compassion. When you falter and react emotionally rather than castigating yourself, extend kindness and understanding, recognizing the inherent difficulty of navigating interactions with challenging individuals. This self-compassion enables you to glean lessons from missteps and progress forward without becoming ensnared in self-recrimination. It is about constructing an inner bulwark of serenity and confidence capable of weathering the tempests of external conflict. Having elucidated the critical imperative of emotional resilience and the detrimental consequences of mere reaction, we now perceive that the cultivation of this inner strength stands as the indispensable antecedent to adeptly navigating challenging conversations. It constitutes the foundational stratum upon which our defenses are erected. Nevertheless, in the heat of the moment, maintaining composure can appear an insurmountable challenge. It is precisely in this juncture that external support systems, particularly those augmented by sophisticated AI, can offer invaluable succor. They can empower us not only to endure arduous exchanges, but also to actively guide the conversation toward a more salubrious and controlled resolution. Conclusion: the inbox illuminates a familiar dread unfurling. Another message, another torrent of accusations, another insidious attempt to drag you into a vortex of negativity. For many, particularly those navigating the intricate labyrinth of co-parenting, this is not an infrequent vexation, but a daily crucible. We have all stood at this precipice, feeling cornered, profoundly misunderstood, and utterly depleted by exchanges that transmute from conversation into a desperate struggle for survival. This, in essence, is the frame battle, an unseen arena where individuals vie for dominion over the narrative, the emotional tenor, and the perceived truth of an encounter. It is a contest wherein one party endeavors to ensnare another within their emotional state or perspective, frequently through provocation, manipulation, or outright disrespect. Throughout this discourse, we have meticulously dissected the often obscured dynamics of these frame battles, acknowledging how readily we can become ensnared in emotional traps, relinquishing our composure and our agency. We have posited that in the face of disrespect and emotional provocation, especially within the tender ecosystem of co-parenting, a strategic recalibration is not merely feasible but imperative. This paradigm shift involves harnessing the formidable capabilities of artificial intelligence to erect a crucial bulwark, thereby enabling disengagement from the emotional fray and the reclamation of one's equilibrium. Recall the scenario we previously illuminated, wherein a client was ceaselessly assailed by her ex-husband with missives crafted to elicit an enraged retort, missives saturated with blame and personal invective. Her immediate inclination was to defend herself, to retaliate, to be subsumed by his distorted reality. This is precisely the fertile ground upon which the frame battle flourishes. He sought to compel her into his frame of victimhood and fury, and her reactive responses served only to embolden his campaign. It is here that the transformative capacity of AI as an emotional aegis comes into sharp relief. By entrusting the initial formulation of a response to a tool such as ChatGPT, you are deliberately choosing not to engage in the frame battle on your adversary's terms. You are resolutely refusing to be drawn into their narrative of culpability, accusation, or self-pity. The AI, by its very nature, is impervious to emotional provocation. It can meticulously process information, discern the fundamental request if any exists, and generate a reply that is factual and devoid of emotional reactivity. This act of strategic delegation is a potent maneuver in the frame battle. It deprives the aggressor of the emotional ammunition they crave and preempts your descent into their warped perception. This process empowers you to maintain your equanimity, to withdraw from the immediate emotional conflagration, and to reassert dominion over your own narrative. The AI functions as your impartial emissary, your objective filter, ensuring that your communication remains anchored to the necessary and the factual rather than devolving into the emotional morass your antagonist endeavors to cultivate. This is not an abdication of your emotions or a surrender to passivity. It is the profound act of reclaiming your power. It is the recognition that you possess the agency to dictate your response, to safeguard your tranquility, and to refuse your role as a pawn in another's emotional gambit. Through the application of AI, you are not merely reacting, you are responding with strategic intent. You are electing to triumph in the frame battle by declining to enter it under disadvantageous conditions, thereby preserving your emotional reserves and your mental acuity. To prevail in the frame battle is not to compel your opponent into submission or an apology. It is to navigate the interaction with unwavering success, without compromising your own emotional integrity. It is to ensure that the narrative remains tethered to verity and that your personal boundaries are steadfastly upheld, even if the other party persists in their own destructive framing. This approach cultivates enduring emotional resilience, mitigating the cumulative toll and damage that incessant conflict can inflict. The principles we have elucidated extend far beyond the arduous terrain of co-parenting. They are applicable to contentious workplace disputes, strained familial dynamics, and indeed, the often turbulent realm of online interactions. Wherever a potential frame battle lurks, there lies an opportunity to deploy these strategies. We implore you to cultivate a heightened awareness of your own communication frames and those into which you are invited. Are you being inexorably drawn into another's emotional tapestry? Are you responding from a place of anger or defensiveness? The recognition of these patterns represents the foundational step toward their dissolution. The journey toward mastering the frame battle is an ongoing odyssey. It demands diligence, forbearance, and an unwavering commitment to your personal emotional well-being. Yet, armed with the strategies and instruments we have explored, you are now equipped to confront these challenges with a newfound reservoir of confidence and control. Envision a future where emotionally charged messages no longer precipitate your descent into chaos, where you can calmly and effectively orchestrate difficult conversations, and where your personal peace is no longer held hostage by another's provocations. This future is demonstrably within your grasp. By comprehending the frame battle and strategically deploying the power of AI, you are not merely erecting defenses, you are actively architecting a more tranquil and empowered future for your interactions. Proceed with purpose, remain steadfast, and secure your frame.